Well, good morning or afternoon, wherever you may be joining us today. My name is Jamie Bardell, and I'm the Vice President of Issuer Events at Q4, the leading investor relations and capital markets communications platform. Our topic of discussion today is how to elevate the earnings experience across your diverse stakeholders and interested investors. We will review best practices to apply to your investor relations website and your earnings calls, and recommendations to consider for setting up a multi-channel earnings experience that maximizes investment opportunities. With me today are Chris Venti, he is the VP, Vice President of Business Development for Virtua Research, and Brayden McCullagh. He's our team lead of Q4's web hosting implementations. Thank you both for joining me today. So Chris, before we begin, do you mind providing a quick introduction for yourself and maybe an overview of what Virtua Research does?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jamie, and thanks everybody for joining. To Jamie's point, I head up our sales team and help out with product development. I've been with the company just about 10 years now. And we were laughing about this before because before that, I was working at a technology company here in Boston. And before that, I was playing minor league hockey. So for anybody that's watching the playoffs, it's been pretty fun. But as far as our company, if you haven't come across us before, we focus on three different areas that we help IR and FP&A and corporate finance teams with. One of which is helping them manage consensus and sell-side estimates. The second piece is that we help companies with competitive intelligence and peer benchmarking. And the third piece, which we're going to be really diving into here today, is that we help companies with how their financials and ESG data are being displayed on their IR website and the consumption of that data. So really excited to be a part of the discussion and appreciate Q4 for allowing me to be here. So.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Well, we're happy to have you equally. Brayden, similarly, can you provide a brief introduction and your role specifically at Q4?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is McCullagh. I've been at Q4 for just shy of 5 years now. So I work as the team lead of our implementations team. So that's the team that helps build, design, and plan out investor relations websites for any publicly traded company. Unfortunately, I don't have the hockey skills of Chris due to lack of hand-eye coordination, but when it comes to investor relations websites, a bit of experience there.
Great, thanks, Brayden. So in today's agenda, we'll cover the IR website best practices. We'll talk a little bit about how to elevate your earnings event and really want to talk also through this multi-channel earnings experience. Now, throughout the session, please feel free to send us a question or a comment at any time by using the built-in Q&A feature. There's a button that should be visible just on the bottom right of your screen. It says Q&A, and your message will only be visible to us. It's not going to be seen by any other participants. So as we begin, let me set some context. Now, if your company is publicly traded, you already know that it's becoming more challenging to connect with investors and key stakeholders. Part of this challenge is driven by available resources. The typical sell-side analyst covers more companies than ever before, so standing out becomes even harder. Earnings presents your best shot at making a strong impression on the street and framing expectations for your investors. Each quarter offers a new opportunity to communicate your company's performance and track record, reinforce forward-looking strategies, and address any investment community concerns. We're going to focus our attention first on the IR website. And as you probably realize, most public companies rely on partners like Q4 to assist them with organizing and publishing important information that helps tell their company's investment story. This is often a collection of stock and financial data, material notices and disclosures, news and event updates, as well as other relevant information that investors, analysts, prospective shareholders, or just the general public will find helpful to better understand your company. IR professionals recognize that a well thought out IR website with engaging design and intuitive navigation leads to better engagement with their site visitors. And better engagement leads to more investor interest. So Brayden, let me turn over to you and let's review some of the best practices that you and your team often promote to issuers.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So some of the best practices that we recommend to clients we're working with, when building out your investor relations website, you want to have an investor landing page that almost acts as your elevator pitch. So in a world of fleeting attention spans, you want to condense all your content and make it as digestible as possible in as quickly a manner as possible. And you can achieve that through an investor landing page that features things like your corporate overview, if you have any key figures you want to feature. So are you number one in this space, or have X number of products, et cetera, et cetera. In addition to that, you want your press releases. So your earnings releases or any corporate news updates, you want those to feed directly into your investor site automatically. So once they're uploaded to your newswire service, you don't want any delay or to need to manually redo that process again on your IR website. Additionally, latest events, you want those to be easily accessible, archived, so that if any potential investor is looking to find past information on events you've held, how that's impacted your future events and the trends there, that should be easily findable as well. SEC documents for any US publicly traded company, obviously you want those to be automatically imported as well, easily sortable and displayed. I wouldn't wish sorting through Edgar on my worst enemy. So governance documents, so you want those to be easily locatable so that if a potential investor is looking to find out who's on your board of directors, who's on your committee composition, et cetera, it's easy peasy right in front of them. You don't need to search. Likewise, for financial reports, you want your quarterly and annual reports all tied together with all associated documents that you release at that time. So your Q1 earnings presentation, your Q1 press release, your Q1 results, everything neatly packaged together and easily sortable to the end user. And then as far as emerging trends that we're seeing in investor relations web, the biggest one we're seeing this year is accessibility. So for some context, in 2019, the Supreme Court in the US determined that ADA, Americans with Disability Act, was applicable to digital spaces. So that actually came from a lawsuit, Robles versus Domino's, where an individual with a visual impairment was unable to order pizza through Domino's app. And so it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they determined just the same way that every business needs, access through like wheelchair access or visible access, the same thing needs to occur on the web and in apps. So it's been a massive initiative now to make the web more accessible to anyone that maybe has visual impairments or motor impairments or what have you. And even in 2022, we've seen a 12% increase in year-over-year ADA lawsuits. And according to the CDC, 26% of Americans have disabilities. So not only is it the legal right thing to do, but it's just the overall right thing to do if you want your message to reach 100% of the public. So what are some examples of web accessibility features? So there's the perceivable. So things like providing text for alternative images. So I don't know if anyone else has had this experience where you go to a website, there's an image and you're squinting and you're trying to figure out what it is, and you might not know, and you hover over, and that little box that tells you, oh, this is this celebrity or this person or this or that. That'd be an example of alt text on an image, and it needs to be operable. So if potentially somebody's unable to use a mouse due to a motor function or a visual impairment where they're not able to see the cursor, being able to operate this word. Brilliant. And keeping on that idea of making your content accessible and available, another best practice we always offer or suggest is ensuring that your investor website follows a familiar pattern and layout. So for example, if you go to 90% of investor relations website, they all follow a very similar layout of investor overview, news, events presentations, et cetera, et cetera. By reinventing the wheel, you're just making it harder for the end user to figure out where the content is located. You can think of if you bought, let's say, a new iPhone, and each time you opened up the call application was in a new location, it would drive you mad. The same thing can happen to potential investors when they go to your website and can't find the content where it should be. And then the other aspect we recommend is ensuring that your content is available in a variety of formats. Not everyone learns in the same way, so ensuring that you're providing videos, articles, potentially social interactions, and graphics that help further display your company's content and investment thesis. And then the other bit is keeping it simple. So I know there's a desire typically to have this big, flashy, robust website, but typically that it does make it either non-compliant or hard to find the content, or can potentially sway the idea of your investment thesis. So keeping it as simple and to the point as possible is always recommended. And then the final trend we're seeing, at least on the website, is the emergence of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So in the modern world, investors want to ensure that companies they're investing in are engaging in sustainable and ethical business practices. So ESG, if you have an ESG feature on your investor website, ensure potential investors that the investment they're making aligns with their principles and aligns with what they want to see in the world. The other bit with that is younger generations are much more influenced by ESG than older generations. So there was a survey through RBC, a bank here in Canada, where they determined that 76% of younger generation was more increasingly concerned with ESG rather than 37% of older generations. Likewise, ESG investing tends to outperform non-ESG investing. So ensuring that your company has some sort of ESG narrative or some sort of ESG presence is essential in today's age.
So I think this is probably a good time to bring Chris into the conversation, because we're just talking about ESG in general. And I know that ESG on its own is sometimes can be very daunting. There's a lot to consider there. So I think, Chris, let's kind of talk about just overall data in general, and what are the things that we should be thinking about for inclusion on an IR website. And I'll just kind of move on to a slide here, but let's talk through just some of the things that you're seeing for best practices in terms of the overall data consumption and reporting aspects.
Yeah, I would say that whether it's financials or ESG data, kind of going to the first bullet here around controlling the narrative. I mean, everybody on this call probably realizes that there's so many different third-party platforms that have a lot of this data that they're collecting on you. So whether it's the Bloombergs of the world, the ratings agencies, and as you know, a lot of times they get it wrong. They're very limited in the amount of detail that they're providing. Whether it's on the financial side, they're not capturing a lot of the non-GAAP and operational detail that you speak to and that a lot of investors are after and value the most. And on the ESG side, a lot of the times it's misinterpreted, or they're not capturing everything, every metric that you're reporting on. So one of the things that we've seen is that making that data obviously a lot more accessible for any external or internal stakeholder is only going to benefit you. And in particular, as it relates to ESG, I'm sure everybody here can empathize with how they're constantly getting surveys. The buy side sending you surveys, the sell side sending you surveys, you have vendors that are sending you surveys that are looking for a lot of this sustainability information. And as beautiful as those 100-page, ESG reports are that you spend an enormous amount of money on, at the end of the day, all of these end users are after is the data, the raw data behind it. And so that's one of the things that, as a small disclaimer that we've kind of focused on is how can we make that data more consumable for these end users, so that they are not running into friction when they come to the website, are not relying upon any third-party data platforms that you don't have control over. But I think that's a really important component to controlling the narrative around whether it's your financial story, your performance story, or this ESG landscape and how you fit into it. Again, making it as consumable as possible is only going to benefit you and the company. That's for sure.
Yeah, I always think about when you're trying to tell your investment story, I think about that as an actual story. There's usually pieces to that narrative, and some of it is going to be data focused, but sometimes the data sets don't necessarily pull in all the details. Like if you were to go to like one of these terminals that you referenced,
Right.
and like what's going on with that information, and is that telling the full story?
Yeah, no, it really isn't. I think the platforms do a really good job on a gap basis. So the fundamental data is very easy for these platforms to collect. But when it comes to that non-gap or, IFRS type detail and operational detail, segment level data, that's the stuff that companies are highlighting, right? That's the important parts of their business. That's what investors are looking for. And these platforms really don't do a good job of collecting that data, just given the fact that everybody reports it a little bit differently. So for any company that's looking to target new investors, onboard new investors, maintain existing sell side coverage or grow that coverage, it has to be crystal clear, those metrics in particular, alongside the gap metrics and the fundamentals, because that's what they're putting into their models, right? At the end of the day, and so if they don't have that complete picture, it's a little bit of a mess. And from what we've seen, is it takes generally any investor or analyst about a week's worth of data collection to have a full 3-year model on the company, and so making that process a lot more simple for them, as you can imagine, is only going to make you look better, to whether it's an investor or a sell side analyst. And that goes with kind of, what we were talking about, Jamie, with how the investment landscape and sell side research is really changing these days, because I'm guessing a lot of the individuals on this call and, individuals that aren't on this call, MiFID is having an enormous impact on sell side research and how the buy side is interacting with these companies. Sell side is covering more companies with less resources, the buy side being less inclined to pay for that research. Both factions, they need help to continue this coverage or to build a model on the company. And without having that level of detail on the website in a really simple format that they could then build a model off of, it's only, in our mind, it could hurt you, and if an analyst comes down to picking one company versus another, and it's easier to cover that company because of what they're including on the website, it's kind of a no-brainer, for them, especially, given the environment. So
You mentioned MiFID though, and I'm just curious here because I'm familiar with MiFID, but I know that it's more like, it seems like it's more geared towards European companies, but
yeah,
is
it's
there still an impact or an influence on North American organizations
it's
that could be?
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, and especially we see it through the consensus business, is that they're covering so many more names right now, and there's a lot of transition on the sell side. You'll see, somebody that's been on the street for 25 years that's not getting the commissions that they used to get is now thinking, what's my next play? A lot of them, as you've probably seen, are going in-house, and working in IR, working in FP&A or some type of corporate development role. And it's only leaving, whoever backfills their position, more companies to have to cover. So it's not as bad as it is in Europe, but you're starting to see it. And it also gets reflected in the quality of research. So you wouldn't believe the amount of mistakes that we see within, these estimates. Now, just given the fact that, it wasn't 10 or 15 names that they have to update a model on in, during earnings when they're all reporting on the same night, it could be 20, 25, 50 companies that these analysts are covering, and it's only hurting the research that much more and more. So the easier that you can make that, again, you want to have control over what's going into that sell side model, so that when the buy side is capturing that and paying for it from the sell side, that it's reliable information, and their formulas are based off of the right actuals, and they're not pulling things in incorrectly, whether it be from a third party or because you didn't have it crystal clear on the website. So.
Yeah, I was also just thinking, and I know I was just mentioning like MiFID, and I know it's got more of a European focus, but as I understand it, that any firm that could be North American based, if they have any investments or any ownership of companies outside their domestic market, they
Yeah.
could be exposed to those MiFID obligations. For example, I know
Absolutely.
Q4 we have an extension company that's based in the UK, so we could possibly be subject to some of those obligations too.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think about that research process has changed so much, and I mentioned previously that sell side analysts are covering more companies with less resources. Is that also the same like on the buy side? Like if typically they're the ones that ultimately fund some of the research aspects. Is that
Right.
happening?
Yeah, so it's interesting that we see that the majority of our tool on websites is buy side driven. They tend to be building a much more detailed model versus the sell side and doing a little bit more due diligence. They're not in as much of a rush as the sell side to update their models after earnings, but they're definitely trying to figure out more of an edge. And I think the biggest thing that they probably are having to navigate is how every single company is calculating things a little bit differently. Like if you look at, any SaaS company, they all have different definitions of billings. They all have different definitions of net retention and, implied ARR, reported ARR. And so they're having to try to make sense of this. So if you can make it, through disclosures, very, very easy for them to understand, this is how we calculate adjusted EBITDA, this is how we calculate ARR billings, then they can normalize that within their models and say, well, when I can compare you on an apples to apples basis against these other companies, you actually do look like you're growing faster, you're a better investment based upon these reasons. And but truly, I'd say the biggest impact is on the sell side, but because they're not relying upon that research as much, the buy side needs even more help, if that makes sense. So it's very, very similar problems, just obviously different use cases in a sense.
So I see here we are with something about being transparent, and I wonder about transparency and just obviously it's the right thing to do, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on transparency and how much to share?
Yeah, I think, going on to that point around the buy side, they're going to find it anyways,
Yeah.
right? They're going to find the footnote. They're going to find if you change a calculation, there was a revision to a past year number, they're going to find it, right? So the more that you can get ahead of that and make it as easy for them to find it, I think it's going to have less of a negative impact, or you won't see that you have a negative sentiment because something was buried down in a footnote or buried in a filing. It was crystal clear that this was a one-time charge or whatever it is, right? So transparency is key in this market because everybody's looking for an edge. So whether you know it or not, they're going to find it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that too. And I think one of the things we've always recommended is that transparency, as you said rightly, if you aren't uncovering it, if you're not bringing it forth, that if there was something, that if there was an update or some type of redaction that was necessary, it is going to be found. And how we look at it is it gives those investors that deeper look into
Right.
the financials. And ideally, in tying it back to kind of an earnings call, hopefully that type of transparency provides that more focused discussion so that it can help reduce the time that you spend in that question and answer session.
For sure. Yeah. And even going a step further, it's unfortunately right now it's a short seller's market, right? And they are looking for anything that they can post on Twitter that this company was lying, or they didn't provide enough feedback, and we found it here or found it there, or we did some type of spot check against some type of vendor agreement. They're all over these companies. So the sooner that you can get ahead of it, the sooner that you can make it just easy and add some type of disclosure why this happened, or again, it was a one-time payment, yada yada. We changed the calculation because of these reasons. It's only going to benefit you and make you look not like you're trying to hide something.
Mm-hmm. I know, just one of the other points here, using concise and I think this is equally and probably even more important, consumable
Right.
information.
Right.
Like everyone sees these press releases, earnings statements that are filled with like text-based tables.
Right.
So, how helpful is that from an investor to be able to consume that information?
Yeah, I always say, like, as beautiful as the websites are, it's a bit archaic in the sense that financial information is the hardest stuff to find, right? You have links to filings, you have supplemental Excels, you have additional press releases, transcripts, and annual reports. So for any IRO to, again, onboard an investor, answer a real-time question, target a new sell-side analyst, it's not like they can point them to a data warehouse and say, hey, here's 3 to 5 years of our historical data. You can export it to Excel, put in your formulas, and you've got a work model from scratch, right?
Hmm.
Instead, it's leaving a lot of room for error because they're having to copy and paste from PDFs and then recheck and double check that. So I would say my biggest suggestion for anybody, no matter what stage of company that you're in, if you're a newly public company, you're a SPAC and you have no sell side coverage, you've been public for 20, 25 years, like getting things into Excel is only going to streamline that process and make your lives a lot easier so that you're not having to answer real-time questions. They're calling you saying, what was the number a quarter ago or a year ago? And having to do some, control F, looking through a PDF and potentially pulling something incorrectly. If you have it in Excel sourced out, it's going to make your lives, a hell of a lot easier in this situation. So.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to take a look maybe at seeing sort of a visual representation of how some of that's laid out in a moment. But just beforehand, I was just thinking about like this last bullet, just on tailoring your communications. And this, I think, is kind of more, uh, you obviously know who you want to attract and promote your content to, but sometimes there's oftentimes secondary audiences
Yeah.
that can maybe become unintentional spokespeople.
Right.
And I think about like employees or customers or board members. Like, so I think there's a lot of opportunity to be able to highlight and share that type of information. And what part of it is providing that non-financial detail as well. That's some of those secondary audiences may, because some secondary audiences may not fully understand all of the data behind them.
Of course.
And
Yeah. I think, it's interesting from an analytics standpoint. We see about 20% of the usage on our product and links is internally driven. So even having a central repository of your performance data for finance, external reporting, IR, FP&A, corporate development, even having that in one place benefits multiple groups within the same company. So they're not having to use their own ERP system or, again, going through filings to try to find one specific data point that could be easily shown in a very simple link. And outside of that, kind of going back to the ESG side, this concept of now, even when you have vendors that are looking for this information and they're sending you those surveys, like that's maybe somebody that IR wasn't thinking about. Where if I'm a head of sales and I want to buy this specific software, within those transactions, sometimes within the contract, they're asking us, things about what is your board makeup, what if, from an environmental standpoint, what are things that you've measured, and I'm sure everybody can empathize. Like, it's really tricky right now. I mean, we're a small, private company, but if you're still trying to figure out that ESG journey, the more that you can have readily available in those situations, whether it's an investor, sell side analyst, vendor, internal employee, it's just going to free you up from having to chase things down and try to make sense of it from multiple documents or multiple applications. So.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've always found extremely valuable of Virtua's Interactive Analyst Center is that inclusion now, or available inclusion of the ESG disclosures.
Yeah.
And that's we were talking about this earlier about, those massive reports, those ESG reports that get generated and cost a ton of money.
Right.
But and it's full of this quantitative data, but but Virtua has this amazing way of making it into a consumable format, and that's kind of where I like to see it. I know we have a screenshot of that. I don't know if we want to look at it, or I'll just put it up on screen here just quick, just so we have something to look at. But
no, of course. So, obviously, if anybody's interested, really the whole concept with this tool is to make your performance data and your ESG data as consumable as possible. So from a financials perspective, on a quarterly basis, our team is digging through your filings, going through your company presentations and transcripts, and aggregating that data into this link, which then integrates with Q4's website. Mm-hmm. And so you'd actually have, a placeholder, a place on your site that you could easily direct anybody to for their modeling needs to answer real-time questions. And about 2 years ago, we kind of took the same concept and applied that to the ESG disclosures. And it was a client of ours actually up in Canada, Nutrien, and talk about disclosures. Theirs are immense. It is kind of an easy way to say it, but their reporting is super, super detailed. And their biggest investor came to them and said, look, we love how you have your performance data in this format. Could you also include your ESG data in the same context? And so I know everybody on this call is hearing, everybody is trying to take advantage of ESG from a data provider perspective right now. Mm-hmm. We are not doing anything monumental. Okay. All we are doing is taking everything quantitative from that sustainability report and putting it into a simple format for these external and internal audiences. Mm-hmm. So for those surveys, what I see a lot of clients are doing now is they point them to this link. Say anything you can tie a number back to, you can export it to Excel, be off, off on your way with the data that you're requesting. So, so that's kind of what it looks like. Obviously, it's customizable. You can add additional disclosures, but we're seeing that more and more clients or companies are leaning into this for a lot of the reasons that we were just talking about: transparency, making it easy to cover the stock, making it easy to make an investment decision on the company, having real-time access to data, and not having to worry about third-party platforms or anything else. They can come directly to the source, your own website, for this stuff. So
mm-hmm. I was thinking about that just now, thinking like, we talked about transparency, we've talked about accessible in various formats, and we talked about consumable, and all those three together, what that leads me to conclude is trying to really establish trust with your audience. And ultimately, that's what's going to lead to a better engagement. Better engagement leads to better investor opportunities. So you start with the trust factor and you build up that relationship. And we can all think of major, mega cap brands that are out there. And the most successful of those are the ones that have built that type of trust with both with all their stakeholders across the board. So really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that.
The only thing I was going to add to that I find really interesting is going back to, like we were talking about, that sell side transition, and seeing a lot of analysts going in-house, and even buy side, we're seeing a lot of people going in-house as well. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that made that transition that reach out to us and say, I remember covering this company or building a model on this company, and how much time, this saved me, and how transparent it was. And so I think that kind of goes into, forget about what we do, making this data as consumable as possible for these external stakeholders. They're going to want to continue that as well in these situations. But thought it was just an interesting tidbit, from some of these conversations.
So I'm sure most of you have noticed Brayden is not available right now. He's had some local internet connectivity issues, and I know, judging by his accent, you wouldn't believe it, but he's actually based in London, England, and I'm not sure what's happening there. But I think he's going to try to join by audio in a moment. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue on with. There's a couple of other things that we wanted to highlight. The next topic is just how to elevate your earnings event in general. So this is kind of one of my areas of expertise. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things here. And first and foremost, just note, obviously, as you would expect, we are delivering today's webinar on Q4's own virtual platform. This is a relatively new platform. It's been in market now for 2 years, and we've invested significantly in this application, and we're very proud of our higher than 99% platform reliability rate. And that ensures the best quality experience for you, the audience, and obviously for our customers too. And if you aren't already familiar with it, let us know, and we'll schedule a demonstration with you. So what I wanted to talk through, though, in relevance to the webinar is just what are the things that should you be thinking about to elevate your earnings event? And I think the first is just understanding just how critical these events are. When it comes to cultivating investor interest and influencing your shareholder base, there's no other best solution other than earnings. All roads lead to that. And as we said earlier, you want to reach your known and your unknown audiences, those primary and secondary audiences, and you want to be able to reach them globally. So using a service like a webcast to deliver your earnings is going to reach those secondary audiences, reach those global audiences. And I think the most important aspect is realizing that there is no room for error. Earnings events are so critical that they have to be delivered flawlessly. And the last, I would say, just on why earnings events are so critical, research has shown that 20% of all price movement is attributable not to the financials, but to what's actually said in the corporate communications. So it's going behind that data. It's making it, it's understanding it. And so that's why there's so much importance on making it so consumable. The one thing I did want to touch on too is just in terms of other event formats and platform capabilities. As we're doing today, we're obviously featuring video. Most of us are now much more comfortable with using video, even in our own homes. It is a more authentic interaction. It's more compelling than any other medium. You can tell from body language if someone's paying attention to you. You can tell if they're excited or if they're lethargic just based on seeing that and recognizing that body language. So you can consider video even for your earnings events. And we're starting to see more and more customers move on to that format. The other aspect with using video is that when you convey a message in video, it will, again, lead to more engagement. There's a higher retention rate when you are in video as opposed to audio. There's a study that we often cite that shows that an average viewer will retain 95% of the message if it's in video format. So just something to consider is to look at video, and it's much easier than you think. The other thing to consider is what about conference calls? Conference calling is still and always will be a popular option, but it has become increasingly more challenging to book your date and time if you're waiting to the last minute. So if you are still considering to use a conference call, make sure that you book as early as you can. Most companies already know exactly when their earnings dates for the year will be. If you are working with a third-party service provider like Q4, let us know, like at the start of the year, that you want to schedule in your dates and times for the year so that you're not at the mercy of some of the challenges that we're seeing in terms of conference calling surge. Also consider, if you are doing a conference call, a method called direct entry. And direct entry provides more accurate registration because you would actually sign in to a web form before you join the teleconference so that your registration details are accurately transcribed. And also by doing so, you avoid what we call this gate crush effect. If you're having a popular event and you might have 100 or 200 participants joining and they're all joining all at the same time, you can imagine that there's this gate crush effect. Everyone has to process their registration and get that into the system. If you provide that direct entry option, that avoids that gate crush. And it's something that we see today, and it's still not quite as ubiquitous as we thought it would be, but it's definitely a much better approach just for your audience. Also consider in-platform pre-recording. in platform, meaning you actually use the same technology to record your event that you'll use to deliver it live. And the pre-recording is something that is definitely more popular nowadays, not obviously for the question and answer portion, but for the formal remarks. You can do that the day before your event, once you've got the script confirmed, and then you would play out that pre-recording and then transition to the live question and answer session so that you can still interact with your audience. Another thing to consider is just similar to the themes we've been talking about today, making it accessible, but also make it interactive and interesting. Lean into the interactivity, encourage questions like I mentioned at the start. Submit a question now or a comment. Use that bottom right corner Q&A box to send us a question. And as I've been trying to re-emphasize, that more engagement leads to more interest. More interest leads to more investment opportunity. And then the final point I'll make on this slide is just consider the 4 PRs of event. And that's not public relations. It's the 4 PRs, meaning prepare, practice, promote, and be proactive. When you prepare, this is obviously a team effort. And the earlier you begin your preparations, the easier it is to develop the overall presentation, both the data and the content. Book your event early, as I mentioned before. Consider that recording to ensure accuracy, and then do your homework for the question and answer sessions. Identify potential key questions to expect and prepare your answers accordingly. Now, tying back to Virtua's offering, you can also monitor research and priority issues that are happening in the marketplace. And Chris, just want to bring you back in the conversation here. I understand that Virtua does offer a benchmarking type of service. You want to talk a little bit more about that and how that could be factored into the preparation?
Yeah, yes. I mean, just on concept, it's very similar, either the consensus and the peer analysis work, that every company that we talk to, normally has access to something like Bloomberg, FactSet, Refinitiv, S&P, CapIQ, and on the consensus side, they all have estimates on them. And the challenge for these IR teams and just teams in general is that all of the information on these platforms tends to be different. They don't capture every single covering analyst from the company. The way that they pull in their data, there's a lot of problems with it, especially on a non-GAAP basis. And they're very limited, especially at the non-GAAP and segment level. So we've typically found that, it's best practice for companies to build and maintain their own internal consensus model by reaching out to their analysts, asking them for their full models, and then aggregating that into an internal model so that they have how these analysts are thinking about their business, not only for this upcoming quarter, but for the quarter after that. Because the minute that you report earnings, they're already going to be thinking about, okay, well, where are we at for the next quarter? How did they change estimates? And did things go up? Did they go down? How is that trending over time? And so having a really good pulse on what your analysts are modeling on the business, I think, is really important. And also being able to compare and contrast that against your own internal expectations. So one of the things that I see a lot of times when I talk to companies is that there's these data silos where, like, IR is housing that consensus model, FP&A and corporate finance, they have all the forecasting data. They're constantly going back and forth asking each other for these data sets, and there's not a lot of collaboration. Work with your finance teams and work with your FP&A teams to improve that process, because if you knew that you're going to miss consensus by 10% or 15%, or you're going to beat by 5% or 10%, that transcript and what you're building into your earnings call is going to be very, very more streamlined. You're going to know what you need to talk about. If analysts are way off the mark for a specific metric or a specific aspect of the business, you know that they're going to have questions about that. So as you do think about like an earnings call, you can be proactive in coaching your management team to say, hey, here's the things that, we did really well that we should be talking about. Here's the things that we didn't do really well that we should also provide some color on. But if we're not going to be proactive, know that there's going to be questions about this as a part of the business. On the competitive analysis side, we take the same approach. And I see this within every company. And this is actually even a more detailed problem across the companies where, again, every company that we talk to has access to something like Bloomberg, FactSet, Refinitiv, CapIQ. And as it relates to doing competitive analysis on these applications, it's very easy to do a quick screen on peers, competitors, partners, whoever you might be looking at. But to get that non-GAAP and operational level detail, it's just not there. And from what we have seen, again, it's not that reliable. So any company that is doing true competitive analysis, we've seen it's a very manual process for them. So they're digging through filings, they're going through company presentations and transcripts and aggregating that data into some type of internal model. And if you go a step further, a lot of the times this is being done across multiple groups within the same company. So IR, FP&A, Corp Dev, M&A creates a lot of repetitive data collection in-house. So if I had one suggestion, if you are doing anything like this internally, find a way to work together with these groups. The biggest piece of feedback that we get is the reason why they have these data silos and they don't share data is because every group wants to view things a little bit differently. So figure out a way to give, each individual internal stakeholder or user that wants to have access to that data, the flexibility to view it how they want. And again, this is going to get you so much more informed around earnings. I mean, if you look at like PepsiCo today, they're growing 14% year over year and their volume is 0%. Like Coca-Cola and these other companies, like you want to know that, and you want to be able to communicate that to your CFO and your CEO. You want to communicate that to your pricing team to see, how they're raising prices and on zero, not more volume than usual. And so having a pulse on anybody within your ecosystem is only going to improve. You could see what are analysts asking my peers. What are the commonalities there, and how is everybody reporting from a top line perspective, or where's the beat and miss, and what was the reaction of the stock? So if I tie that back to us, we have the same investor mix. If we miss by a penny, you know what, we could be down 5%, or we could be up 5% based on what we saw with this other company. So I think when I talk to companies from an IR perspective, you want to elevate yourself, right? And you want to have a voice in the room and be more informed, provide more value, and having a better understanding of what's going on, whether it's with your sell side analysts or what's going on with your competitors. It's only going to benefit you and the company as a whole, and your team. So I think those are other things that you could potentially be focusing on as it relates to that earnings prep and post earnings kind of reporting and communication for sure.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I think we're just going to move on to the last section, just as in terms of just omni-channel considerations, and this one is just kind of more of a recap as well, hopefully, of some of the things we've already spoken to today. Obviously, one of the first things is that you should be leveraging digital channels to tell your story. We've talked a lot about the IR website and other formats, but the investor website is just one aspect. You should definitely be incorporating social media channels. Those are essential platforms to spread the word about your earnings results. And one of the most compelling trends that we witnessed in 2022 was the continued surge in social media use. That was one of the most notable changes. Brunswick conducted a digital investor survey, and 80% of investors use a digital or social media source at least once a day. And 98% of investors use those digital sources to conduct their research. So ties in quite well. Last point, I see Brayden is now back, is think about showcasing your earnings story on your IR website, and ideally in one centralized place. And Brayden, we often will recommend this to customers, that if they have an event, they have like a dedicated event section in their IR website. But is there more to that? Like just focusing just kind of on the earnings experience?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I look at it from the website is bring your content to where your audience is. So if your audience needs a dedicated web page, if your audience is on social, if your audience, wherever your audience is, make your message, everywhere so that it can be seen by everyone type deal.
Yeah, I also I know that we often recommend this, that on earnings day we feature some kind of pop-up alert on the homepage, so you get that one-click access directly to the webcast. So there's really simple, again, making it accessible, making it easy to navigate. Um, then the maybe one of the other things to consider is, following the actual earnings call itself and the presentation, condense the highlights into key talking points. This is something that we do ourselves, is that we take some text snippets from the actual transcript of prepared remarks, and we might post those snippets directly onto LinkedIn or to Twitter, just to gain more attention and exposure to the organization. Even the text is one nice area, but we're starting to see some companies actually take snippets, short audio or even video clips from the presentation and distribute those small segments. It's a great opportunity to showcase the leaders of your company, and just make it into a much more digestible medium for those stakeholders. So this does take us to the end of our kind of formal presentation. We'll let the conversation continue with maybe some questions, and just going to take a moment here. And if you have any questions or comments, please, just enter them now. Use the Q&A button at the bottom right of your screen. And I think we have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is, how common is it for companies to publish the sell side model they create, to avoid that reliance on those third-party terminals? Chris?
It's a good question. We don't see it a lot in North America. We see it a lot overseas in Europe, that companies will post on their website consensus figures. And what we do see in North America is that companies will do what they call blinded consensus. So they will, when they're having a conversation with JP Morgan, Citi, whoever it may be, JP Morgan could actually see, here's where my detailed estimates are on the company, and here's where all the other 7 or 8 analysts that cover the name are. But they can actually see, well, here's how I compare at a very detailed level, which they can't see on Bloomberg or FactSet or some of these others. And so they will provide that to them. But that's, over email and what we call blinded consensus. But it's a good question. We see that coming up a little bit more frequently. I think the only thing that companies have to navigate with that is some kind of Reg FD issues, where you don't want to come across as supporting a consensus number. It has to be more informed of saying, here's where you are compared to everybody else. Take it with what you will, right? So you don't want to really be sponsoring anything like that. It could create some issues.
Great. Yeah, that was a very good question. Thank you to the submitter. All right. Well, I think I just was looking at the clock here. I didn't realize that we almost have taken up the entire hour. So I think at this point, I think we should probably wrap. And once again, I'd like to thank Chris and for Brayden for joining me. And on behalf of Q4 and Virtua Research, thank you, the audience, for your time and participation. We hope you've come away with at least 1 or 2 new ideas that you can incorporate into your investor relations communication strategy. And if you have any other questions or would like to learn more, please visit q4inc.com or virtuaresearch.com. So that will conclude our presentation for today. And thanks again for attending.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.